Great, great, great. Hey, it's good to see all of you today. You got the JV, you got the B team All Star because we couldn't find anybody else to come today. So I hope that it'll be helpful for you today. I'm really, really grateful to see all of you. If I don't know you, my name is Scotty. I am the pastor here at Journey, one of the pastors here at Journey. A lot of you haven't been back in our building since COVID started, and it's so good to see all of your faces. I miss people. I miss seeing my people, and so I'm glad to see you today. I hope you enjoy lunch. So, I want you to think about just for a moment today, we're going to talk about the power of clear communication and how incredibly important it is in our interpersonal lives and as our lives as leaders. I want you to think about maybe with a coworker or an employee, family member, one of your direct reports, a time when you met with them, talked with them, shared some really important information with them, and then the next time you bumped into them or interacted with them in a work environment or somewhere else, it was as if they never heard you, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I know I said this. I know that we talked about doing this and doing it differently and doing it this way. And it's a little bit frustrating. And you start to think, what is wrong with this person? Like, why did they just obviously can't listen. And they're not acting on what I've told them that I was super clear. I know I was. And you think you're a great communicator until you have a teenager, right? And then you realize, I don't know what I'm doing. So look at this quote with me from George Bernard Shaw. It says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Isn't that true? It's true in your marriage, but it's certainly true in environments where we lead, that as we communicate, we think, I've said it. We think I've communicated. We think this matters. And I think in a season that we're in right now, not only in our workplaces and our homes, obviously politically, there's a lot of miscommunication back and forth. If you watch the debate, you probably thought, what's going on? Who's talking to? What is happening? A funny meme that I saw was about a drinking game. And if this person says this, you drink this, and this person says this, and when they interrupt, and then they said, we would ask them how it went, but they all died from alcohol poisoning. So this is important. We have to understand this. Leadership comes with a microphone. In other words, many times we get into leadership roles and we don't realize how much and how important our communication is. If you're a leader, an influencer, if you have a staff or a department, a family, you have a microphone. And I don't mean like a microphone that you're going to grab and stand on a stage. Some of you do presentations. And you do meetings and present information at corporate events, but every single one of us has important things to say, and it's important that we say it incredibly clearly. There's no such thing as a leader who doesn't communicate. We don't get a job, a position, a place of influence and leadership without being able to communicate. And we don't get to be absent from that. It's incredibly important. So today will be short and brief because that's how I normally roll. But I want to give you a couple of, the best I can, key ideas, 4 big ideas today about what it looks like to communicate clearly. Not that I am the best at this, but I have worked incredibly hard to be a simple, clear communicator. And I think these are some things that we could walk away with and some very practical things that we can do to be a better communicator in our environments of influence. First thing, as a leader, I think that we need to understand is that clarity is the closest thing to certainty. Every person wants certainty, right? Can you promise me? And the trouble is that as leaders, we can't, right? We can guarantee, you can't guarantee certainty, but you can give clarity. We're in a political season right now, and for whatever reason in our political environment, it seems as if you must promise something that you certainly cannot guarantee. But as a leader, we want to be constantly doing everything we can to provide clarity to our people, giving them as much information as possible. If you have a staff team, a department, a group of people that you're leading, more information is better. How we share those things matters. You know, panic or disgruntled things happen when people don't have enough information. They start looking from other people, coworkers, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? We want to do everything we can to give clarity and to say, look, I don't know exactly how this is all going to turn out, but we're going to figure it out together. Here's everything that I know right now about this situation. For instance, when we ran into the COVID situation, we started having lockdown, and obviously in my line of work and for our team, everything changed radically from thousands of people gathering in buildings to, hey, we can't do that anymore. So it was really, really important for us to get together and to see each other face to face over Zoom and to talk about some things and to say, hey, I don't know what will happen next, but here's what I do know. What does that do? It just starts to calm our souls. We go, okay. And the more information that I have, the more at peace I am. And for some reason, sometimes leaders think I have to hold that information close to the vest. Like what I learned in the senior team meeting, I don't necessarily need to pass. That's like a source of capital for me. But the more that we can give, the more our teams trust us, the more clarity we can. I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but here's what I do know. Okay, in the middle of that, just another little tweak to those ideas is that your voice is more important than your words. So here's what I mean by that, is that as a leader, oftentimes we are tempted to default to an email or a text, or here's what I got from corporate, instead of, hey, this person I'm responsible for, I get to lead and influence, they need to hear my voice. Not even like the string of the words that I said and how important and saying it right, but my voice oftentimes is more important than my words. Equally, your presence is many times more important than your presentation. You know what I mean by that? When I walk up onto a stage, I want that presentation to be a well-oiled machine. I want it to be perfect. I want things to flow and smooth and to think about those things in a real clear way. But many times in a time of crisis or disruption, or there's some things changing in our department or organization or our family, it's really, really important for your presence. Your presence matters, more important than exactly how you present that information. So think about it like this. How many of you have ever been in an emergency room waiting on a loved one and waiting on that doctor to come out? Now, that doctor comes through those doors, and what do? We stand up because there's something about his presence and his voice. He didn't text you from the operating room, hey, it's okay. No, he comes out and you hear his voice. You don't even remember exactly what he said. You just wanted to hear from him, it's going to be okay. So as a leader, oftentimes that's what we need to do. Our people are craving certainty. We can't give them that. There are no guarantees. You can't make promises you can't keep, but they do need our voice and our presence in the middle of that. Number two, in communicating clearly is this, and you know this if you've communicated at any length of time with a team. When you are sick of saying it, they are just starting to hear it. When you are sick of saying it, they're just starting to hear it. When you are sick of, right? So as a leader, oftentimes we say, I already told them. I already said. I thought I made it clear. You have to repeat yourself over, and just when you think, oh my goodness, then the person on your team will go, oh, okay. At church world, we say we can announce it, we can put it on videos, we can put it on social media, we can tattoo it on your body, and people would still say, when is that event? Like that, we want to say that over and over, especially when we're trying to build culture on our teams. We cannot express it enough. How many of you have ever been to an offsite before with your work and you come up with a list of values or culture statements and you've got them on the wall and you spend 2.5 days doing that and everybody's tired and fighting over this word choice and then we put it on a poster and then nobody ever talks about it again? Right? Does that ever happen to you? So you just keep going through, but we have to keep coming back to it and keep saying the same things over and over again. It is the same in our families, right? Anybody have teenagers in this room? Okay, that you think, I have said this to you, son, so many times. I've said it over and over and over again. Where is your brain, son? And then your son will do something like this, maybe, if you've not had one in this age group. He'll come home and he will say, Dad, I heard this from my coach or my teacher or my youth pastor. Isn't that amazing? And you think, I've been saying that to you since before you understood what words were, right? No one ever left a company because a boss over-communicated. No one ever said, you know what, I'm done with this place. I've got too much information. No one left a company because a boss said, hey, I just want to make sure you're in the loop on this. Do you have what you need? Tell me how things are going. How can I help you? Okay? The power of clear communication. We give clarity, information. We don't hold it back. We give what's appropriate. And then when we're sick of saying it, they're just starting to get it. Number 3 is this, and this is hard for people who are loving people. Clear is kind. Clear is kind. It's something we say on our staff team all the time. Because if you're a nice person, you're a loving person, and you care about people, oftentimes we're afraid of saying clearly to that person what they need to hear. And when I say clear is kind, I mean that we are kind, and we say it in the least abrasive way possible, but we are direct. Have you ever had a leader or a supervisor or someone say to you something about a specific situation at work, and it felt like they were beating around the bush and they were saying all kinds of platitudes, but they just never got to the point? And inside, and maybe you didn't even say it out loud, you were thinking, what are they trying to say? What am I doing wrong? How can I improve? And you're thinking to yourself, I wish they would just say it, because then I could, correct it. So you can be kind and clear at the same time. In fact, being clear is kind, because the people that work on your team and who are in your circle of influence, they would appreciate it. They need you to say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what, let me give you some feedback. When this happens, this is how everyone sees that. When we don't do like that, is a kindness to people. So when I'm communicating with somebody on our team or in our church or in our circle of influence, I think I need to be really clear with this person. And then I think about these 3 areas as I'm going to communicate with them. I think about these, honestly, as I teach on a stage. I think about these 3 areas, but it's just as important in every personal relationship. Number 1, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to know? As clearly as I can possibly, what is it that's the problem, source of tension? What is it that we're falling behind on? What is it that I want them to know? To share as much information as possible. Some of us are a little better at this than others. Some of us swing too far and we give them just piles of spreadsheets and data and a presentation. But really, what is it that I want them to know about whatever conflict we're dealing with? Number 2 is, what do I want them to feel? What do I want them to feel? Because feelings and emotions lead to actions. We don't ever change unless our emotions get behind that. So what do I want them to feel? And the third question is, what do I want them to do? What kind of action do they need to take in response to this conversation? Again, I apply this to messages and team teachings, but especially in personal situations. So let me give you an example. So our family team, which oversees birth all the way up through high school. Jamie Heiner helps lead that. We've got several of our family team members in here. In our current climate, we're not able to gather in the way that we were before, to serve families in the way that we were before. So I sit down with our team and I say something like this in a staff meeting or through Jamie. Hey, here's what we know. At this point right now, we can't meet in classrooms the way that we did before. Well, how long is that going to last? I don't know. We don't exactly know how long that's going to last. It really is kind of out of our hands. And as soon as I know, I'll tell you. But right now, here's the current set of situations and circumstances. In our normal Sunday services, we can't have kids in the way that we did before. What do I want them to feel? I want you to feel like you're empowered. I want that person to feel like, hey, you guys are creative and brilliant and fun, and you've built all kinds of systems before. You can figure a way out of this, okay? I want you to feel like this is your problem to own, and I know you can solve it. And then, what do I want you to do? I want you guys to come up with 3 or 4 ways that we can love and serve families who can't gather in this building. And so they went to work. Hey, I know we can't do this. We're empowered to solve a problem, and we're going to come back with 2 or 3 things that we need to do. Now, you apply that to your situation, whether it's a teenager or whether it's a direct report or somebody in your department. How do I want them to feel about what I'm telling them? What do I want them to know? What do I want them to do? Because, listen, if you can't define it, they won't do it. If you can't say, here's the problem, here's exactly what we're trying to accomplish, then they're going to spin their wheels. Okay. Number 4, you're probably thinking I would get here, but remember, with communication, it's not about you. We get in trouble when we're communicating and trying to communicate clearly when we think it's about them hearing what I have to say. We have to put ourselves into that person's shoes. We have to say, every time I walk onto any kind of stage and talk, I think it's not about me, it's about my audience. What do they need? So when I'm doing a presentation or a sales report or sitting down with a direct report, it's about this person. How can I serve and build this person? This past Sunday at church, we talked about words, and we talked about the power of our words and how our words, the Bible teaches that our words are life or death in so many situations. And you know this, like you understand, no matter if you're a person of faith or not, you know that words that have been spoken to you have scripted and steered your life. Some of us have had great words spoken to us, like a string of syllables that really shaped our lives. And somebody said, hey, I love you, or will you marry me, or you are accepted, you got the promotion. Or the opposite side, hey, you didn't get the job, it's cancer, I want a divorce. Like those strings of words, they shape and steer our lives. So listen, this is so important. As a leader, as a person who influences on your team, it's incredibly important to know that, hey, my words matter. They're powerful, and they weigh 1,000 pounds. And so we brought out some cinder blocks here on stage, and I said, when you say things to people, especially if you are their supervisor, you're their boss, their world depends on you in a lot of ways, their livelihood. You can either hand them these weights that they carry around that become a burden to them, or you can craft those words in a certain way that they become stepping stones, foundations for their next season of their life. And I want you to think about the bosses, mentors, coaches in your life. Some of you, you're where you are because you had a boss, coach, mentor who said something to you that sparked something. Your words have the power to set on fire creativity and innovation, and I can do this, or they have the power to burn somebody's life down, right? We know this. And so if you were to think for a few moments, you have a few people in your life who said quiet things to you and said, hey, I believe in you. You can do this. Hey, straighten up. Like a lot of us men had that in our life. Somebody going, hey, You need to straighten up, stop being a knucklehead. And that steered us down a certain path. So there is such power in clear communication. We cannot give people certainty, but we can give them clarity. And when we're sick of saying it, they've just started to hear it, right? And when we come to people, we need to be clear because that's kind. Being clear is kind. So it's not about you. It's about, are we going together? As a leader, it's our role to take people on a journey that they've never been on before. Whether that's our kids or our coworkers, it's our role to take them on that. And that will require you communicating in different seasons. So the last thing I'll say before I give you my point for us to take away is I want you to think about the number of meetings that you're in per week, right? Now it's kind of multiplied with, because people think, hey, I can get you anytime. You can be in your pajamas, and we're going to do 37 Zooms today. When you think about the number of meetings you're in, and so many times we walk into that with people, our people, and we're unprepared. We didn't. Now, I don't mean that you don't have the sales market forecast or all the data. I mean, I didn't think about who's going to be in the room. These are people. And what am I going to say to them to help move the ball forward? These are unique individuals. And so just like with my family, I want to study those people. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what motivates this person or that person and what's important to them, because all of those things matter. If you're a business owner in here, I want you to think about your payroll just for a minute. You think about that P&L for the whole year and you go, okay, that line item for staff, salaries, benefits, and I want whatever that number is for you, you just kind of divide it by 52, then you divide it by 40. All right? You don't have to do the math in here. I'm not a math person. I cannot do that right now. But you get the point. If you just, 1 hour a week costs you or your organization thousands of dollars. And so when you're sitting in a meeting, you have to think about that. A one-on-one or a 5-on-1, like that's an investment that your team, your company is making. So every time you go into that staff meeting, you don't think, oh, it's our weekly staff, I hate this. We're spending thousands of dollars probably to be in this room right now, depending on how many people are in it, right? So what I prepare to communicate clearly is incredibly important to our team and to our organization. So, last thing to walk away with, what is the number one thing you need to communicate to your team in this season? What's the number one thing you need to communicate to your circle of influence, your direct reports, maybe even your family, your children right now? And here's what my experience has been. It might have been yours as a leader too, is that changes each season. And so at certain points, about 3 or 4 months and a quarter, what I like to do is to get alone, to think. For me, I pray and I prep and I think, where is everybody on the team? Where are we trying to go? And then begin to script out conversations about that. What's the number one thing? Take a little time to decide. And then guess what? You're going to say it clearly, kind, because clear is kind. You're going to give it as clear as possible, and then you're going to keep saying it over and 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 over. And then somebody is going to go, oh, you're trying to say, like, yes, that's what I was trying to say. Because right now in your world, what our people need more than anything is clarity. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we're going to figure it out together. Here's what I know. Here's where we're going. So that's my message for today. So hopefully it was helpful. Jamie?
Awesome. Yes. We're going to open it up for some questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, just raise your hand. Travis will have a mic over there, and I'll be over here. Would love to know, or just a comment or something for Scotty that he can expand on or drill down on or answer for you. So anybody got a question? Anyone want to lead us off? Richard?
Hey, Scotty, thank you so much. So when you apply that to remote, are there any things that you've learned that you used to do it one way that now, because or the preponderance of people are doing things remote, how do you communicate those same ideas and that culture and stuff remotely, perhaps in a way that's different than the way you do it?
Yeah, that's really good. Anybody else just love being remote? If I could do one more Zoom meeting, I could die. Yes. So I think honestly, at this season, do you guys try to imagine what it would have been like 10 years ago to go through this when the technology wasn't there, and how difficult and challenging that would have been. But I think having video call helps a lot to see people's faces. Our staff team in the first month of this, we met 3 or 4 times a week just for check-in, just so, hey, I can see, because you remember, it's a little hard to remember now, but first or second week of March is like, hey, is the world ending? I was buying canned goods and stocking up. And so I wanted to see everybody's face, and I wanted them to see my face. It goes back to that voice and thing. I think that's really important. But there are some challenges that I think as leaders that we have to just lean into and not check out in, and say, I want to see your face. I want to talk to you about this. What's going on with that? Now, of course, we're able to do some in-person things now, but I think if we can break through that barrier, we can keep doing the same kinds of things. I think seeing your face, saying some things to you is really important. So I don't know if that answers your question, but and if anybody else has got tips, we are wide open for that. So.
Scotty, thank you. Regarding over-communicating, do you follow a process that helps you remember to continuously communicate the same thing? Because I find I get so busy, I say it, I move on. I say something else, I move on.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think finding, a simple pattern of even review is really good. One of the things that I'm not always the best at this, but try to do is, hey, as I'm crafting a staff meeting agenda for me, I have 25 people I'm meeting with, and then 5 other direct reports later. I have a little notebook, and I might write down some thoughts, and I keep going back to that page each week as I'm creating the agenda. So here's some things that we're talking about, we're really fixated and focused on, to come back to. And then we'll put it at the top of the agenda, a phrase that I've said before. And then we're going to cycle through that. Hey, next week we're going to talk about this. Next week we're going to talk about this. Travis, who leads a lot of our operations, he'll come back and go, hey, we haven't talked about this in a while. So it is an intentional thing of like putting culture into an organization of, okay, maybe there's 6 culture values or whatever important things for this season. How do we rotate them around, put them at the top of the agenda? Hey, guys, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Let's come back to that. As a church, I'm giving away our secrets here. But in a calendar year, our team behind the scenes knows, hey, in August, we're going to talk about this. In September, we're going to talk about this. And we just do that every year. And then I don't remember what I talked about 3 weeks ago. I don't imagine you will either. So we just keep coming back to that rhythm. But it's got to be intentional, right? You got to create your own system to think about it. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Scotty, I am curious, how have you dealt with people, maybe on your staff or in your church community, that have had a really hard time adjusting to all of this? Maybe, it's real, right?
Right.
And, I'm a great communicator, I really care about people, but there are times when, I'm at a loss. I just
Right.
don't know how to help them.
Right. That's a great question. We just ask them not to come back. I'm just kidding. No, it's there's a tension, right, as a leader, because there's an empathy for this person, but then there's also a job to do, and we've got to move forward. And that's a tough tension. I just want to acknowledge that. Like, hey, I really, really care about you. Also, we've got a responsibility. And, depending upon the severity of that situation, you have to have different kinds of conversations. I think acknowledging the realness of it, is really important. Also helping people, right now there's an undercurrent of fear and anxiety that our media machine feeds into, right? And so that's the message that we hear all the time, because that sells. Nobody wants to turn on the news and go, hey man, it's getting better. Nobody watches. So I think being patient, but then also being clear. This is our responsibility. And no matter the circumstance, generations before us, and I don't like not being super historical, but generations before us have faced very difficult things. During the first part of this, the first couple of months, I was reading a lot of World War II history, and specifically in London, where there's bombings every day in the city of London, and children and parents were getting up and going to school and work. Can you imagine living in that? We don't know. Siren goes off, we go to but life goes on. So how can I be compassionate about that, but also a clear statement? We got to move forward. So I don't know if that helps or not, but we all have responsibilities.
Hey, Scotty.
Hey, man.
What's going on? I think kind of the built-in assumption of this information today was in the for-profit world.
Yeah.
We're leading teams of people in companies or
Mm-hmm.
our own small businesses or
Yep.
whatever. But what if we were a room full of people in the not-for-profit world
Mm-hmm.
where we're leading teams of volunteer help as opposed to paid help? We're getting ready to launch
Right.
a not-for-profit
Right.
business also, where we're going to be leading groups of volunteers.
Right.
Does any of this get tweaked
Yeah.
a little bit, or is
Yeah.
it all just the same stuff?
Well, luckily, we know a little bit about that. And because there are hundreds of people who volunteer here in our organization. And I think all the same principles apply. The additional component, I would say, to that is that casting a compelling vision of why is incredibly important. Motivation for most of us comes from the why, right? And so when we have in our world adults who do childcare or nursery, and hey, we would love for you to come and volunteer an hour of your time and wipe babies' rear ends and change diapers. So we're not motivating to do that. We're saying, hey, you're creating an environment where a mom and dad can relax and come into a worship service and have an experience that they couldn't have without you. You're incredibly important. When you stand out in the parking lot and shovel snow, like those, so we always go back to the why, celebrating, magnifying, this is why we're doing this. And then all the other things matter, right? Being as clear as possible, saying it over and over again. It's about you. When we're recruiting volunteers, we're constantly thinking about what's in this for them. Normally we flip that on its head. Hey, come join our organization. We're great. Come help us do what we're doing. We want to flip that and say, hey, we want to get to know you. We want to know your gifts and how you, can plug in here and make a difference with your life. So that's a couple things.
Anybody else?
Hey, Scotty.
You work here, man.
Just to put you on the spot, because you would put me on the spot. One of the things you said Sunday, which was a reminder, I've heard it before, but it was a reminder when you told the story about the power of words and how that has impacted you from the coach and then later on that youth leader or whatever. I think it would be good if you don't mind telling that story a little bit, because we're all parents. Most of us are probably parents in here. So, and now as a grandfather, knowing, I guess, being reminded of the power of our words, incredibly important. Also as leaders, because we're speaking into people's lives on a regular basis and changing the course of their life, we potentially as well. So maybe you could share that, or.
Sure, man. I'll close it out with that, and then Jamie, you'll. So when I was 13, I was in the 8th grade. Pardon me if you've heard this story before, but I was in the 8th grade, and I went out for this football team. It was 2 weeks of practice. I played baseball and other sports, but never played football. And then I didn't really even know what was going on. And so at the end of that, they were going to have cuts. You remember when they used to do that? And so they had cuts. And so then the coach, instead of posting the names of all the kids who made the team, decided he was going to get his clipboard out and call out the names of all the kids who he was cutting in front of everybody. And I don't think he meant any harm by it. He was just an old school coach, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. I can smell the grass. I can see my friends. I see a coach standing there. He's got the tube socks going on, the polyester coaching shorts. You guys remember those 2 buttons right here, hands in his pockets, little bald, little mullet going on, Magnum PI mustache. So anybody else play for somebody like that? You know what I mean? So I'm just sitting there watching, and he starts to call off the names, and my name was the second name. And so I popped up, and I'll never forget. He just said, hey, there's simply not enough room on this team for everybody. Some of you just aren't good enough. Marked me. Fought off tears, got in the car, drove home, and it scripted something inside of me to pursue athletics to an unhealthy point, to matter, to say there'll never be another place where I don't belong, and it led down some really unhealthy paths. Fast forward 4.5 years later, I'm on a bus going to this little youth trip thing, and there's a youth leader there. His name's Hugh. He's an enormous man, big guy, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, tell me your story, and I start to tell him some things about my life, and he says, I believe in you. I believe in you. God has great plans for your life. You can't imagine what God's going to do with you. Those strings of syllables shaped my life, good and bad and unhealthy ways, in some really great ways. I'm standing here today because of the second words, I believe in you. And then he pulled me under his wing, taught me, became like a dad to me. Those words changed the course of my whole life. You never know what words you're going to say to an employee, a coworker, a kid, an aunt, an uncle. Yeah, you never know what you're going to say that he probably doesn't even remember that day, because he's just the kind of guy who said words like that. But it changed my life forever. So the words we say weigh 1,000 pounds. They can either be burdens that people carry or foundations that they stand on. So thanks for letting me share with you today. Jay.
Thank you so much, Scotty. There's, the one thing I guess I can just tell you right now, my one thing was when you mentioned how people feel. How do I want people to feel? Because sometimes I want to be right, or I want to get my point across, or I want to be very clear and those kind of things. And all those things can be important, but, how you make people feel, I know the reason that stuck with me is because I know how you make me feel and how you make other people feel when you lead and you have those conversations. So, Groeschel has another quote that he shares at the end of his podcast all the time, that people would rather follow a leader who's real than one who's always right. And, when I think of that quote every time, I think of Scotty and the way that he leads us and the way that, that I want to emulate too, because sometimes we can get stuck on being right. We can get stuck on, having all the answers. And sometimes it's just more important that we just, like you would say, I don't know. Like everyone was probably saying that, or should have been saying that. Like, I don't know how we're going to run this kids ministry. I don't know how to handle this pandemic. We've never had to do this before. And, but he did. We didn't, we wanted cameras on, wanted to see people's faces, leading an organization through that. A lot of times you might hear or even have given a talk, and you might be regurgitating somebody else's talk, or you might be, you might have heard it or read a book, and so you're teaching on it. But this guy's speaking from, experience regarding how to lead an organization through this time. And probably many of you are too in this room, because you're leading people through an unprecedented time. And so that's what I appreciate about you, and I just appreciate about this time right now, that we get to experience that. We get to be a part of that, this unique season. We heard, I think it was Maxwell, he said, this is not a wasted season. Everyone wants to get past 2020, right? Oh, just blow it up, forget it. Can we get to 2021 yet? But this is not a wasted year. This is not a wasted season. It might be a season of wilderness. There might be some rerouting and detouring where we are off track a little bit. We don't know. We took a wrong turn, but we're still aiming at that end point. But he said, don't despise the detours. Don't despise the wilderness. That's where Jesus spent a lot of time and learned a lot, right? So anyway, we're learning, we're growing. Appreciate so much the opportunity. I think great leaders always learning in every circumstance. And in fact, over the last couple of days, I've been helping my wife's grandma move out of like an assisted living situation and going down there. She's 90 years old, and she just don't want to be there anymore. So we were moving things around and getting things out. And, I love my grandma because she's such a spiritual leader and has such a great heritage amongst the family. And we had a great conversation. And as I'm leaving, me and my wife are leaving, and she says, I love you, bye. Now, you better drive safe. You're a terrible driver. And I was like, what, Grandma? And she's 90, and she has no filter anymore. And I can't wait to be at that place where I have no more filters. But I just listened to Grandma because I think she has a direct line to God, and I'm not going to argue with Grandma at all. And I said, yes, Grandma, I'm going to be a better driver. And I was like, why did you say that? Why are you saying that about me? And she goes, well, like 4 years ago on my 86th birthday, you drove me home, and you were terrible. You are, and so she said a lot of things, and I just heard, I heard all these different points that I probably in my mind, whether she said them or not. But my one thing that I left with was, I'm gonna drive the speed limit. Like I took one thing from that conversation. There was probably a lot in my mind of, being aware of traffic and not tailgating and, using my blinker, but my one thing that night that I learned was I'm going to drive the speed limit. And what do you think? Sometimes you just got to hear it from the right voice, like Scotty was saying with coaches and teachers saying the same thing we tell our kids. And what do you think my wife was like? What do you think I've been telling you this whole time? I tell you this every time. Anyway, we need to be teachable and coachable. And so I'm so excited that you guys came today, and I'm really excited.